This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get 26% off an annual subscription using the link curiositystream.com/featurehistory, or you can wait till the end to hear more. Hello and welcome to a wonderfully niche featurette, where we'll be taking an episode to have a quick delve into answering the question you had in the shower last Thursday. Why do the Japanese Yakuza have tattoos? You know the classic image of the Yakuza gangster? Yeah, the one in your head right now? Dresses sharp, probably smokes, maybe missing the tip of his finger, but definitely covered from neck to knee with beautiful traditional Japanese art. The tattoos are synonymous with Yakuza, but why is that? Assuming you didn't just Google that question, feel free to pull up a chair as we go into the history of tattooing and how it developed and found its link with the Yakuza clans. Tattooing, or irezumi as it's known in Japan, is an art form that stretches much further back than the history of the Yakuzas or even the shogunate. Ancient Japan saw tattoos of decorative and religious nature as a cultural norm, though the practice wasn't universal across the entire archipelago. It was around the 4th century this began to change, however. As Chinese culture became heavily influential, tattooing took on negative connotations. The use of penal tattoos that marked murderers, thieves, and other criminals made its way across Japan, causing decorative tattoos to become increasingly fringe, only seen in the more secluded and isolated regions. But it was in the wake of the Sengoku Jidai, the age of warring states, that our knowledge of irezumi became a bit more concrete. Japan entered the Edo period under the Tokugawa shogunate. The period was hallmarked by sustained peace and isolation, and as a consequence, the weakening of Japan's feudal system. Traditional Japanese society had placed emphasis on classes that represented government and military, but continued peace saw wealth drain from the samurai and into the hands of society's lowest class, the merchants. The newfound money flowing through commerce and trade also gave rise to illegal commerce and trade. Gangs formed and the rackets of peddling and gambling slowly organized into more sophisticated Yakuza clans. The clans formed around strict hierarchies that prioritized loyalty and obedience. The Yakuza rackets brought in immense wealth for those involved, but even outside of the gangs and the crime, the merchant class took in riches. Merchants were prohibited by law from flaunting their wealth in the way that samurai and daimyo could. So instead, merchants would typically invest generously into the arts and culture of Japan. This gave way to the Ukiyo-e art movement in the early 17th century, which saw the popularization of woodblock prints depicting kabuki plays, scenes from history, folk tales, religious stories, nature, and even erotica. The popular art form resonated with Japanese of all classes and became a staple of the culture. The prince even found an audience in the low classes, the outcasts, the labourers, all demographics of the Yakuza. Many of them would be ex-convicts marked with penal tattoos. With the wealth gained from their criminal exploits, it was a popular choice to have their tattoos covered with horimono, a design of tattoo heavily influenced by the popular woodblock prints, commonly depicting scenes of heroes, animals, or religious figures, and covering from shoulders down to the person's elbows and knees. These pieces were incredibly expensive, painful, and took a very long time. The process was done with sharpened bamboo tools by hand, and the artists who could pull this off were few and far between, found only by word of mouth. Given the strong social taboos on tattoos though, horimono was not to be shown in public. Tattoos, and even specifically horimono, were not unique to the Yakuza, however. Those of the merchant and artisan classes would sometimes, though rarely, commission these works for themselves, but were held to the same taboo and superstition as their criminal counterparts. When the shogunate fell and the Japanese Empire was restored to full power in the late 19th century, laws were created prohibiting tattoos completely, to be more in line with Western views. Even under prohibition, tattoos would continue to be made. The laws, and time, would strengthen the Yakuza's association with horimono, forming a tradition for the clans. It began to be seen as a rite of passage into these gangs. They represented dedication as days of work went into them, It showed the willpower it took as the process was painful, and it showed commitment given the permanence of tattoos. The artists that did Horimono were, if not members of the clan themselves, at least heavily tied to the Yakuzas that used them. Japan's views on tattoos developed alongside this. Tattoos were for criminals, and in art, tattoos were used to represent outlaw figures. The Taboo Act even became romanticized as roguish and individualistic. When the US occupied Japan after World War II, the tattoo laws were abolished, but this only left it in a legal grey area. Despite not being illegal, people marked with tattoos were barred from many gyms and public spas. Businesses and families would distance themselves from tattooed people as well. However, cultural attitudes are always shifting, and influenced by the dominance of Western media and portrayals, tattooing is less taboo with younger generations in Japan. Helping this is the fact that many Yakuza members these days elect to not be tattooed, as it's simply a dead giveaway to the police. Now it's not that unusual to see everyday normal Japanese civilians get tattoos. The taboo is still alive and strong in older people and businesses, but the link between having tattoos and being Yakuza is progressively getting weaker. Current tattoo artists in Japan are required to hold medical licenses to do what they do, but medical licenses are not issued to tattooists. Legally, it's still an underground industry, but as the cultural norms of Japan are continued to be influenced and changed by the foreign world, it may not be too long until the tie between the Yakuza and their iconic tattoos is gone. Just a footnote in history. However, tattooing and the art of Horimono is only one of many art forms that has been taught and practiced in Japan. Katanas have their own interesting history, which you can explore in the documentary In Love with the Samurai Sword, over on CuriosityStream. The feature goes over the process and mastery that goes into the art form, and CuriosityStream itself has thousands of more documentaries and originals you can check out. The streaming service covers history, science, nature, technology, society, and beyond. And when you nab yourself a subscription to CuriosityStream, you also get one to Nebula, which is a website for educational channels like myself, where we host our video libraries ad-free, as well as exclusive content. So head over to curiositystream.com/featurehistory and nab yourself 26% off an annual plan to the service. And as always, I'd like to thank the people that make this possible, like the sponsors, the patrons, and oh yeah, me for being a total gun. Next video, I'm really hoping to make a uniform video, but the postage is pretty shithouse at the moment. Who would have thought a global pandemic would do that? So fingers crossed, but we'll just have to wait and see.